Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Welcome back to Invest Africa. Remember, we value your suggestions and feedback, so please send us an email to investafrica@abn360.com or interact with us on Twitter through @CNBC Africa, #InvestAfrica. Still with me, my guest, Dr. Kelvin, Kemm, CEO of Nuclear Africa, Kalipa Mtati, Associate Director at KPMG. And in our Cape Town studios, we still are joined by Cornelis Vander, Head of the Energy Department at Frost & Sullivan. Welcome back, everybody. And during the break, Cornelis, I must let you know that these two at the desk were having quite a go at you. So I'm going to allow Kelvin to come back first with his argument.
I think what it is Cornelis on the right track. We've got to have a mix. Renewables is not going to work for base load. We just got to get that right. We've got to have African solutions. Now, I'm very conscious we're talking about all of Africa, not just South Africa. And now if I'm getting back to my nuclear again, I'd like to just make it quite clear that I'm not talking about nuclear for South Africa only, but for all of Africa. Big nuclear is like 2,000 megawatts, which is the sort of thing we have at Kuburg, but there's smaller nuclear under design now, which is like 100 megawatts. Currently, I spoke a while ago to the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and he told me that 21 African countries have already formally declared their intention of going nuclear, and 10 have started. Because it'll take about 5 years for them to get legislation on the books and to get site selection underway. So all African countries can start today on nuclear. Now, where Cornelis is on the right track is that we've got to have this mix. But we've got to look at things like the shale gas, for example, and not necessarily taking the shale gas and burning it for electricity, but getting nuclear to produce the electricity to take the shale gas to do a Sasol exercise and turn that into petrol and diesel and so on. And as we were chatting here during the break, we've got to look at our infrastructures, and maybe we need grids across the borders and mutually beneficial things between countries that hasn't been thought of before. We've got to be imaginative. There are many solutions waiting to be found. We just got to have the courage to go look for them.
It sounds like the gauntlet has been thrown right in front of you, Kalipa, in terms of thinking out of the box and getting infrastructure that we've never seen before. What should we expect from KPMG in this regard?
Okay, before I get to that, I just need to add into his point, and that I agree with his point about getting the mix right. The second point, I don't know if I heard Cornelis right about each country must look on its own. Cross-border, I think, is the way. There was a point, maybe if you go like 8 years back, where every country that you are at, when you go to the lenders, they'll ask you, where is the Eskom PPA? So there is just no way that, especially for big projects, that each country, like for instance, if you take Inga or you take Batoka, like hydro as well, there is no way that those projects can be done based on that country only. It has to be, you have to give it like a NEPA status or a SADC status, even an African Union status if you want, like a flagship of the continent. It's impossible because certain countries, as much as they have the resources like coal or maybe water or like, you know, the rivers, but in terms of creditworthiness of that country, then you would need a PPA with a stronger non-power or Eskom, you know. So it's like this cross-border trading, it's very important and it's key for our continent.
Let's look at an example, Kalipa, where there has been an integration or a collaboration between multiple countries. And particularly, let's look at the Southern Africa power pool. Given the stats that we heard earlier, we know that there are challenges and there's still a lot that needs to be done. But my question is, how do you package these initiatives in such a way that the multi-country focus and collaboration becomes attractive to an investor?
Okay, it's not an easy thing. Let me just say that, because I've been involved in projects that are developed by more than 2 countries. Because once you deal with more than one government, it just becomes you need to be able to handle them. The only way to do it, and the best way to do it, if you take that project and you may put it in an SPV and it becomes, all the countries becomes shareholders for that project. I mean, we've got so many, I mean, think of Korabasa, I mean, with Eskom as well as an off-taker for bankability purposes. And remember, at that time when they were getting their independence, for Portugal to continue with supporting the Korabasa, they had to get an off-taker, which was Eskom, because it was Eskom even before. So, I mean, we need those things, but for this to work, you need the the SEP, if it's a SADC project,
Right.
to be involved. For instance, there's a project now that they are currently doing, it's called Zizabona. It's Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia.
Right.
It's being developed by 4 countries. But for that project to take off, they needed one coordinator, which is SEP now. And as I can tell with that project now, you've got AFDB that have already said that they're going to fund 100% of the project. But if the countries, you need one coordinator, that's the first thing. And secondly, as you know, that the challenge comes to the regulations. We've got different regulations in different countries, but we need to work around that. But if you've got one coordinator like SEP, because SEP has done a wonderful job. As you know, that SEP is a functioning power pool in the continent,
Right.
compared to the other power pools.
Regions, yes.
Yeah, to other regions. So it's important to have one coordinator. It's also important to make sure that like our regulations are also tied together.
I'm going to quickly go to Cornelis, and I want to give you, Cornelis, an opportunity to fight back with this tag team that's happening here in Joburg. And I know that Kelvin has already got something that he wants to come back with. So let me allow you to come back on some of the points that have been made.
I think that I don't disagree fundamentally from what our other speakers are saying. What I'm saying is that realistically speaking, cross-border projects at this stage is just not going to materialize on any significant scale. We might have pilot projects here and there that might show a lot of promise and in the end might turn out to be profitable and viable, but large-scale investment is not going to materialize. Global best practice, in fact, dictates that no country should have imported electricity of more than 15%. Otherwise, you become too dependent on a neighbor. And we've seen this materialize in Russia, for instance, where they supply a lot of gas to Europe. And as soon as there's any tensions, there's a threat of this gas pipe being turned off, which have significant ramifications downline. So it is important that we have energy independence. If we take the example, for instance, of Inca, the West Core project was driven over a period of more than 5 years, and it just fizzled out towards the end because we just can't seem to get this cooperation right. And this cooperation is essential. So the economies of scale needs to be created. And our policymakers and our government officials, I implore you, please people, let's start working together. Realistically speaking, though, it's going to take time. So for the time being, private sector will need to get involved in the industry. We need further deregulation of the industry rather than more involvement of government. And that will allow companies to identify projects on a smaller or a larger scale with whatever technology they choose to use to ultimately drive what is the backbone of any economy, electricity.
Final comments from you, Kevin, before I come back to you, Kalipa.
Well, what I wanted to take up was Kalipa saying, and I agree entirely, we need good leadership and we need somebody in charge. And that's what's important, because the investment is not only who owns the actual plant. For example, coming back to the nuclear again, the Director General of Energy here in South Africa, Nelly Magubani, has already indicated that we're aiming for 50% local content, which means there's a huge amount of money to be made by people getting involved with making pumps and valves and pipes and electronics.
So it's along the
There's a
supply
whole
chain.
lot of things. You don't have to own the power station to make money. You can be involved, but it needs good leadership. As she said so wisely, somebody must be in charge and somebody must run the show properly. It mustn't be confusion. Similarly with the cross-border organizations as well. I agree with Cornelis. We need power independence. We can't have a risk factor such that somebody else is controlling our electricity that we can go dark. But that means good leadership.
I've got to jump. Kalipa, your final comments.
My final comments would be, I would urge that the regulators should be independent, number one. Very independent, not wearing two hats. And secondly, we need to have cost-reflective tariffs. And then mostly we need to support one another in the region.